Now I'm recording. All right, so once again, welcome to the Bullseye Target Training webinar, and this is part one. When I was going through creating the presentation, I realized that I had planned way too much for us to do today. So this is going to be part one. Part two is going to focus specifically on improving one's remote viewing sessions, and that will be something you can look forward to in the next couple of weeks. So just a little bit of background about myself here. Usually I forget to introduce myself when I'm leading classes, and then there's a few people like, well, who is she to be presenting this material to us? So just a little bit, I've been an app member, really pre-app, for about 5 years. So I've been to every conference Marty's had for the last 5 years, and I have been very active as far as being a viewer. I was originally also a group manager here or there starting out, but I really found it to be quite an arduous task, and with a lot of different challenges, and I found that really I was more comfortable in the viewer role as far as associative remote viewing went. Also, I have not traditionally been too involved in wagering. I don't tend to wager myself, and I also am not really into sports, so I figured I was best able to contribute by being a viewer. In addition, I've been a remote viewer I've been studying remote viewing for years, but officially I started learning controlled remote viewing about 6 years ago, and I've studied with several teachers, Lynne Buchanan and Lori Williams and Courtney Brown, up through the advanced CRV levels, and also studying extended remote viewing and several other kinds. And then in addition, really before I got into remote viewing, I was a clairvoyant. I was a clairvoyant student and reader, and started the International School of Clairvoyance, and I've been teaching clairvoyant reading techniques for the past 12 years or so. But this is actually the first time, even though I've been around with app or pre-app Marty's party, as we sometimes like to call it. This is the first webinar or class that I've actually taught or led, so this is a great honor. So one of the things that happened was I was noticing that there's been a number of changes, and that some of the different app members, some of my group peers, I've noticed going through different levels of change and stress. And then there's always this ongoing question of displacement, the D word. And sometimes it's more prominent in discussions than other times. But really, it's been there ever since I've been around, and it's not just a part of associative remote viewing, but in addition to these activities here, I've also in the last year and a half done a lot of targets as part of a couple different research projects as a viewer in research outside of app. And whether you're talking about ARV or other types of remote viewing research, and let's see, someone's just going in and we're hearing a little bit of interference. So if you guys can find, actually I'm going to do this, I'm going to mute you, but also I'd like you all to be familiar with the mute button that's next to your name, to the left of your name on your control panel. And for those of you, if you can mute yourselves, that's always helpful too, because then if you have a question or a comment, you are in control of unmuting yourself. So why doesn't everyone make sure you know where your mute button is? And that's great, like that. And also for those of you that are new to GoToMeeting, you have the little control panel, and sometimes it just gets lost behind your other screens. So if you suddenly can't find it or can't figure out how to mute or unmute yourself, just move a couple screens around and you should be okay. So getting back to the topic here, the even within regular remote viewing research and projects, whenever you have something that's called decoy targets, where it's either it's a popular design in remote viewing research to have a viewer view something, and then either they are given a set of photos afterwards, and their task is to choose which photo it was that they were viewing. And so that would be self-judging, and then, or it may be an independent judge or a panel of judges where maybe the viewer doesn't see those photo choices, but the judges will see a few, and they have to choose which one most closely matches the viewer's session. And this enables them to easily calculate things on a statistics level. It helps them to analyze a session very easily. But then there's sometimes that generates the phenomenon which we here call displacement. So different questions and concerns that have been part of this group here are also questions throughout all of remote viewing. The other thing is that even when you're not talking about having different sets of photos, which are sometimes called decoy target sets. Even when you're not dealing with that and it's just a straight RV session that maybe someone is given as a practice target or as, let's say, an operational target. An operational target is where you're using remote viewing in order to gain information about something in real life that needs where someone's trying to solve a problem or an issue or find somebody. And regardless of what the end objective is for the remote viewing session, a big problem and where things tend to go wrong is where the viewer is viewing something that they really aren't supposed to be viewing or aren't needed to view. They're viewing something other than that. They may be at the location, they may be on target, so to speak, but they're not describing what really ultimately needs to be described. And really all of remote viewing, whether you look at any methodology like controlled remote viewing or extended remote viewing, whatever you want to call it, part of the training involves teaching the viewer how to view exactly what they're supposed to be viewing, or at least what's needed, as opposed to what they find interesting or what just happens to draw their attention. So the nice thing here is within the app community, we have so many different opportunities to be exploring this phenomenon, and also just as far as being able to come together with, we have all these different groups and different viewers with different skill levels, and there it's as if we have hundreds of researchers all working together. That's what we really all are here. We're all informal researchers that are working on our own little projects, but then we're sharing the information, and different groups are discovering different things that they can share with each other. And so that is really pretty cool. So one of the things that happened was I asked, well, what can I do to help the app community, and particularly with Firefly, because that's adding in a whole new dimension of, I don't want to say issues, but it's just bringing up things that we haven't dealt with before. And I noticed some stress. So I said, what can I do to help? And I realized that I have been approaching just my whole experience with app from just more of a intellectual perspective. And I realized that I, like everyone else here, we all have psychic abilities, and we can actually use our abilities not just to view pictures for ARV or not just to view targets, but to help us in our own lives understand what's going on. And so I took a short time, it was very short, maybe even just 15 minutes or so, And I went into meditation and I said, okay, how is this looking? What would be helpful here for the community as a whole? And I got some answers and insights that not only gave me what I just call information that I can share, but it actually created a shift for me in how I was seeing many different things. And unfortunately, a lot of times we just forget it within remote viewing that we can use what we're doing with these projects on ourselves to grow and learn, and on the things in life that we need some help with. So this webinar here is a response to that. And I just wanted to give a disclaimer here that what I am presenting is really my own views and opinions, and not necessarily a reflection of the app management or anybody else. So just wanted to make that clear. And here on my screen, I have the words "Let's get emotional." And as you can see here, or as you will pretty soon, we cannot ignore our emotions. We cannot ignore the impact that both our emotions, our needs, our subconscious, unconscious urgings and motivations, these are very much a part of who we are. They come through in remote viewing and they influence and affect us. And I have a theory that these are really what are most at play when it comes to issues around displacement. And what you're going to see is that this is a very different approach. For those of you who know me, this wasn't what I was saying even just a few months ago. A lot of you know that I have, over time, really questioned different protocols. I've had criticism over them, particularly self-judging, and I have to say that that is really changing, and part of that is changing because of my personal experience doing these other experiments where either the protocols did not involve self-judging, they were very controlled, and either displacement still occurred. And conversely, a experiment I recently participated in where there was self-judging, I self-judged. However, there was very little displacement. And out of 16, I did really 25 targets, but I've only received feedback for 16. And out of the 16, 13 would have been considered hits, and only 3 would have been misses. And this was for self-judging. And in that case, the self-judging really was not a problem. And I'm going to explain that in a little bit. So what I've done is really turn my attention to personal motivating factors and factors within the viewer, as opposed to just looking at what is going on with the protocols. And so you're going to see here in a few minutes that this presentation focuses more on that. It's not so much about adjusting the protocols, but rather adjusting what's within us. The other thing is that traditionally in app and particularly within the different remote viewing communities, they oftentimes are being managed by men, by people of the male persuasion. Now, that's not to say we've had some very active women who have worked with Marty. We have Teresa and Lorraine and a couple others that have really been a very strong part here. But overall, there's been a lot of men, and men, for the most part, don't tend to focus on emotions, some more so than others, but a lot of times that's just not really where the focus goes. And let me just see if I can move to the next slide. Okay, so our goal,
Debra, this is Carlos.
okay,
Yeah, hello? Yes.
yes.
Yeah, yeah, yes. Mm.
Carlos, did you have something to
No,
add?
no, no, no. I was just going to suggest that how to do that, how to go to the next slide, but you're already there. Fine.
Okay, good. There's a little delay. And can you see this slide okay?
Yes, yes.
All right.
But you have a little icon in the left. In the left down, you have three icons down. Yeah. If you click on the right one, no, 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 exactly on that one, click on that.
Okay, great.
Yeah, and now you just have to hit the arrow key in your keyboard.
Okay, I think I should be good now. Thank you
Yeah.
very much.
Nothing.
All
My
right.
pleasure.
Okay, so this webinar is intended to help you decrease displacement, improve your sessions, release stress, recognize and deal with burnout, improve communication, explore your feelings regarding passes, and enjoy success. And the overall theme is hitting the target will equal success. And let me just say here that well, I scheduled for us to go for 2.5 hours. I am not planning that we're going to go that long because I broke it up into two parts. Okay. Oh, so hitting the target, what I want to really do here is get my overall goal is to have people with their conscious minds and their subconscious minds actually hitting the target so there will be a hit and describing exactly what needs to be described. And so that is really one of the main point of this or one of the main points. And so I'm going to keep reiterating, and that's why we have the symbol here of hitting the bullseye. It's not most people in app who's been here for any period of time is very much able to hit somewhere on what would you call it the overall target. So where you what do you call this? Anybody the red and white round thing, would that just be called the target with my picture here off to the side, the theme with the arrow going in? Um, you have the red and the white lines, and if you think of it like in for app, most of the members can hit somewhere within there, and that corresponds to the idea of viewing, that we all are pretty good viewers, and some are more experienced, but pretty much the viewing is not so much a problem. There are some people that really could bring their level up, and that's why for part two I'll be discussing that. But really, the main focus here is hitting that bullseye, which is describing the actual final feedback photo. So hitting that actual bullseye will help to make money, make you successful, help your teammates. It will improve your remote viewing, increase everyone's fun and enjoyment, and improve your reputation as a viewer. And now remember, this may seem obvious, but what I'm doing for a lot of you here today is my goal is I'm talking to different parts of you. So I'm going to be talking to your logical minds, but I'm also talking to your subconscious right now to get all parts of you in alignment. And so as I'm going through this, I want you to just tune into your own self and just if this feels comfortable for you to say to yourself, self, let all of me be open to this, let all of me be open to hearing about my goal is to hit the bullseye, which equates with viewing the actual final feedback target. So consistently missing the target will decrease your effectiveness as a viewer in both ARV and RV. and will decrease your productivity and contributions to the whole, and it could result in losing money. And now when I wrote this, I was like, oh my gosh, like that might make people feel stressed out. And the whole purpose of this is to help people de-stress and get relaxed, or that's one of the purposes. So why even bring that up, the implications of it? And so this is where, let me go back to that. We have two paradigms in operation here, and both paradigms are in the process of switching over. And I'd like to go through these paradigms, and it will explain then to you why I am taking more of a hard-nosed approach here. And before I go through this, I would like to just point out here again that within app, there are many different levels of experience. And there is everyone from some brand new people here who maybe just joined in the last month or two, and they're still getting their feet wet as far as even trying to understand what ARV is and what their groups are, and everything that's involved. For those of us who've been around for a while, we understand still how confusing all of this can be. There is a lot to learn, a lot as far as the different protocols and understanding how it works and why we do what we're doing. So there's that on top of understanding how to remote view, even if you didn't add on the whole process of ARV. So for those of you that are just starting out, I want you to know that really I am very glad that you're here, and there are aspects of this presentation that are for you, but also know that a lot of what is in this presentation is speaking to people who have been around for longer and maybe are feeling a little bit stuck in their process, or just feeling a little bit frustrated, like really wanting to get the numbers up or consistency up, and something just seems to get in the way a lot. So I'm really speaking to a broad range of people. And for those of you that are just starting out, there is no way you can do this without having a lot of errors and a lot of there's a gigantic learning curve, as I will be talking about soon. So don't let any of this stress you out in any way. But what I want to talk about right now is a tale of two paradigms, and starting with just psychics in general. So the old paradigm until not too long ago, and when I talk about paradigms, a paradigm is a collection of beliefs and behaviors and perspectives, and not everybody all at once has the same paradigm. There will be people at the beginning of a paradigm, the middle, and the end as it shifts into a new one. And so what I'm calling the old is maybe what most of us here have either shifted out of or is in the process of doing. However, there are still plenty of people operating in the old paradigm due to a lack of education. Many people just do not study this stuff very much. And there are even, I've just written a paper on this for parapsychologists, because there are still many parapsychologists, people with PhDs who get funding to study psychic phenomenon, and yet in many ways they are still operating within the old paradigm, which I found to be really surprising. So the old paradigm was that psychics are either gifted or not. Their abilities are limited, meaning some may have very strong abilities, but that's pretty much what they can do is what they can do. Not too much more than that. It was very mysterious. It wasn't very well understood. Well, why can they do these things and no one else can? Not understood. Anything that's not understood and mysterious, and someone just kind of exhibits or stumbles across, that means there's not a whole lot of control. And that makes them vulnerable. And it also makes them highly sensitive because they don't really know what's going on. And if you're vulnerable, then then you get sensitive because, well, anything can come by at any time and mess you up or take away your gift. That's a pretty scary idea. There was also the idea that psychic abilities were one's God-given abilities that were very, very special and very, very sacred. And I'm going to say that one, I believe that still stands. But at the same time, I believe that about everything that we bring to the table as far as our skills. So, those of you who are really good at math, that is a gift from God. Those of you that can write well or who are wonderful parents, or excellent communicators, or wonderful gardeners, or who can play chess, any of that, or sing. I would do anything to have a beautiful voice and be able to sing, or to be coordinated and be able to dance. These are all God's God's gifts to us in the exact same way that some people are extremely talented with psychic abilities. On the other hand, I actually believe that psychic abilities are something that are more learnable and trainable than let's say someone that's just born with like a gorgeous voice, or someone who is so extremely coordinated. Or all these things could be learned, but there's actually psychic abilities are something that really, in my experience, after training really thousands of people through both, I have 3 books out on psychic development and have been teaching classes for years. And I know for sure that it's trainable, and many of you here yourselves have received training. And if you haven't received official formal training where you actually paid for it and went somewhere to get it, many of you have been exposed to informal trainings and learning from each other, and you've seen your progress. Any one of you who has been doing this for any period of time has seen progress from when you first started till you were now, whether that training happened just through sheer experience or from the wisdom of others being imparted onto you. So we know now the new paradigm is that there are different methods, and it's not just simply a magical thing, but there's practical aspects. And when it's trainable and there's methodology, that means we have a lot more control over it. And really, that also to me means that there's unlimited potential. As long as we are able to learn, that means we are able to grow. And there should never be any kind of limit on growth. And that's really what we are experimenters with in-app, and we are experimenting so we can continuously get our game up to levels that we have never even possibly conceived of before. We are just really at our infancy of understanding how everything works and getting control over it. So just a couple other parts of this is that for the old paradigm, it was a matter of, if this was about doing God's work and being gifted, well, it was looked at, well, then a person shouldn't really get financial compensation for that. I mean, is it really right to get money or to make money from God's sacred gifts? But once you change the perspective to, well, people who can be doctors and attorneys and things like that, they get paid quite a bit and they only got there because of the intelligence that God gave them and the discipline. So you start really looking at this too, that, well, maybe we really do deserve some compensation from all this work here. Maybe besides for just having fun and getting to connect with each other and getting to learn and grow and all that great stuff, maybe we actually can make some money that will help cover all of our expenses, and or just start to even make up for what we've put into our training, or the time that this work took away from all the other things we could have been doing to make money. And so making money is something. Now, I know there's a lot of people here who have been wagering with ARV for a long time, and don't need to really think of it this way. But there's plenty of people that come in that really do feel a bit nervous about, like, is it really okay for me to make money from my psychic abilities, whether that's with wagering or doing other types of psychic work that generate income. And once again, I'm hearing a little bit of noise in the background. So if you guys can, whoever's not muted, if you could just mute yourself, and that way when you have something to share, you can unmute yourself. And if anyone's not sure where that little microphone is on the control panel, it's to the left of their name, your name. Okay, so then let's look at the two different paradigms. And as I'm talking about this, I really want you to be putting your attention on yourself and be thinking about, well, where am I within these paradigms? Where do my beliefs lie? Because you can see I have two columns here. And in addition to having you figure out which column you may be in, you may be somewhere in the middle. And sometimes when you're in the middle, it's kind of like it's possible to feel a bit discombobulated, to feel confused and unsure. So that's part of the reason for this discussion. So now let's look at the paradigms that have been operating within app. And just in case there's anybody here who's brand new, there's a couple names here I see on the list that I don't recognize. So app stands for Applied Precognition Project. And while the name app and the official structure came about a couple of years ago, really, when I'm referring to app, I'm also referring to pre-app, with the organization that has really been, it was more informal, but that Marty was really spearheading until he had the brilliant stroke of genius to to start developing groups that could be part of what he was doing. And so now we have what you see today, many groups working under the umbrella of the Applied Precognition Project. But so let's talk about the different paradigms. When I came in, and I can only speak to about 5 years ago, but I know several people that have been working with Marty for years before that. So when I came in, the old paradigm, it was actually called ARV for Fun, which is now the website that Teresa runs is called ARV for Fun. And for those of you who haven't seen her website by that name, it is a terrific site with so many wonderful examples of terrific ARV sessions. But so originally, at least when I came in, I had seen a flyer that said ARV for Fun, and having fun was the major objective. Which I'm going to say that still is the major objective, but now there's more objectives, I would say, than simply that. So there were maybe a lot more newer viewers. Those of us that are here today, we were newer viewers at one point, obviously, and overall, I would say there were a lot more newer viewers than there are now. Um, there was really no pressure and no expectations, and this has been so important for Marty, and he has emphasized this over and over again. And really, we have to. I feel like Marty's entire being is so underestimated. Marty's so friendly, and he's so approachable, and he's enthusiastic, and he wants everything to be fun for people. And um, sometimes because of that, people, I think, within the overall remote viewing community um, don't even realize how incredibly brilliant he is. And I can tell you, as someone, I am part of so many different remote viewing groups and communities, and I have studied with so many different teachers that they have different groups of viewers under them, and and also being part of the research communities. And I can tell you that there is no group at the moment that is achieving as much as the Applied Precognition Project, and that has such a fantastic cohesiveness and level of cooperation amongst its members. And I have to attribute that to Marty and his demand that that things be that way, that we work in a supportive, no pressure environment, and that has really it's really paid off by what we have right now. Um, and then also Chris, who's also one of the app managers, that is also he sets that criteria as well, as far as how people have to respect each other, and also how this is supposed to be for fun. But so that's very much part of the old paradigm. Um, Other parts of the old paradigm were really about private wagering. Um, People were able, as they are now, to still wager on their own. And that aspect, to me, I've noticed that, and this may be a reflection of just how people are in general, but people are very private about their money, especially in the United States. They don't talk about their finances, their financial situation. They tend to not talk about how much money they're earning or how much money they're winning. It's very, very private, and that's how it has been within app that I've just noticed. Now, I would say that that has some pros and some cons, because we really haven't been able to determine how does private wagering impact the whole process and the outcome. And I have suspected over time at times that there may be times where someone's own personal wagering may actually impact the rest of their group. We're not going to get into that, but that is a possibility. In the same way that now with Firefly, where many people here today are actually members of the Firefly investment group, which I would say is part of the new paradigm, and that may have a bearing on the outcome of what's happening. But again, we're not really going to be focusing too much on the outer issues that may lead to one thing or another today. Right now, in this discussion, I'm just pointing out the difference in paradigms, and I went off on a little tangent there. So there was smaller membership, and there was really just Marty was basically originally the one leading things, and then he had a couple others. When I came in 5 years ago, Tom Atwater was very involved. He was helping to run some of the horse racing groups, um, which we had. There was definitely individual viewers having a lot of success, particularly Tom, and there were other people involved, such as Lorraine. She was doing good, and Teresa was also in a bit of a leadership position, but there were just a couple leaders. And so now with the new paradigm, since Marty a couple years ago opened it up to creating more groups, and the viewers have been growing, there is now some new aspects to app. I would say that people just naturally are becoming more goal oriented, and it's a natural progression that when enough people have been doing the same thing for a long time, that they start to get focused. This happens in our own lives, and it's happening as a group. We're more goal oriented. We've some of us have now done hundreds or thousands of sessions, or judged hundreds of thousands of sessions, and while we still want to have fun, some people are at the point where it's like, okay, well, we want to see a return on our investment. We want to see a return on the time and attention we're putting into all of this work. And so there's also with that is there is a stronger research interest. There's an interest to keep track of data, and some of that just so happens to be an element of who the particular people that have come in. There's more and more people that are more better at numbers and math and have their own personal research interests. And again, some of it's a matter of, okay, well, we have a lot of hearsay. We know that we've been doing this for a while, but we need to start keeping records of things so we don't, because there's a sense of not wanting to keep repeating history and understanding, well, what works and what doesn't. And in order to do that, someone has to keep track of that so we're not just going in circles. And this is so a natural response to that is there is record keeping going on. Part of this is possible, again, because Marty came up with the idea of having different groups. And with different groups, he was able to get enough people excited who were willing to be group managers. And so that meant it took some of the burden off of him. There's no way that he could be doing everything that he was doing. And he, as one person alone, there's no way that he could be keeping track of all the data, and or even with research, like Marty likes to say, and I hope he doesn't mind that I'm talking about him here, but he is fond of saying that he's retired. He did research his whole life, and research takes an enormous amount of time as far as collecting data and reporting it and writing it up and controlling everything that needs to be controlled. So he as a one man force could not do that. But now that there's more people, it's possible to start actually taking our data and using it for research. And when it gets to that, the research isn't just for us to improve personally, but whether or not we even know it or like it, there's a larger remote viewing community that has a lot of attention on what we're doing here, as they should, because there's some very incredible things coming out of this community. And it's not just remote viewers, but they're the remote viewing community. It's the whole parapsychology community. Um, Mention of app and even some of app statistics are starting to show up in other parapsychologists' meta-analysis studies. And so what we're doing here is being noticed. And so that's making it also where it is more important to look at, well, what records are being kept, what's making up those records. Is it just that we're just all experimenting and having fun and just trial and error like it has been, or which that's a very different picture than when your records reflect more controlled um, trials that are conducted in a more controlled way. And so that's all part of what we've been looking at. And so now what's come about is Firefly. And I'm not going to talk very much about Firefly because not everybody here is part of it. And just trying to not have that be the emphasis here, but still that definitely plays a role in us getting more serious. There are implications as a group. There's a lot of people who are investing and are hoping for the best, and so just getting a bit more serious as far as that goes, and so if we can see how far can we take it and how successful we can be on profit wise. So then we also have new protocols such as CAS and WE. All right, so which side of these paradigms are you on? And as I've been talking, I hope that you will think of yourself like, are you just here to have fun, which is very much a noble concept, but is there something more that you're wanting to get? And where are you? It's not for me to tell you where you personally are, but where are you? And how does this impact your thinking, behavior, and emotions? So let's take a learning curve break. Now, what happened just last night, I was putting this PowerPoint presentation together, and for my slides, as you may have noticed, I like to have little pictures. And so I thought I would, one thing I do when I'm putting together presentations, which is very helpful, is I just think about, well, what symbol might match whatever concept I'm trying to convey. And I Google it, and then I Google a key term, and then I go to images, and I just start to see what images are there. And so that was just my intention last night. I put the word learning curve into the search engine, and then I clicked images. And this was on Google. And I was very amazed to see how many super cool images of learning curves there were, and different types of curves being depicted in very creative ways. And so I ended up spending probably a whole hour looking at these. And as I was looking at these, I started to have both some realizations and actually quite a bit of an emotional release. So it was a very interesting experience. So I decided I wanted to share some of what I found last night with you. So this was a cute one. This is a bunch of people falling off the learning curve, and you could see to the left little guys falling off, and then there's some graves. And so what this made me think of is how over the years there are people that have were originally interested in remote viewing and in associative remote viewing, and even some people who were part of App or Marty's group, and they fell off the curve. They either decided that they didn't want to do remote viewing again, or for some it wasn't so much even a conscious decision, they just kind of stopped. And some stopped participating because they hit some frustrations, whether it was um, frustrations in their own sessions, frustrations with displacement, whatever it was, they fell off the curve. And now this one was simple. And and let me say here, what I found was that a lot of the cool thing about Googling Google Images is when you look to see what images are on the first couple of pages, a lot of times that I feel like it gives you an indication of where people's it's kind of like putting your finger on the pulse of what's happening with society in general, particularly those who use the internet. And I found that a lot of these slides here that I borrowed from, they were created by people who were involved in the gaming industry, as far as video game creators, or people who are trying to get their skills up for playing particular video games. And I thought that was really super cool. And this is just really a side note, but we tend to think of people who play video games as just kind of slouching off, kind of wasting their time or not being productive. But I have a 15-year-old son who started playing video games when he was 5 years old. And I was worried about that, of course, as a mom who had been told about the evils of video games when I was growing up in the 1990s, 1980s. Actually, I was growing up before that, but I was a teenager in the 1980s, and we would hear about how the dangers and evils of video games. And so I was worried, and then I started to notice something interesting. I started to notice my son was watching video tutorials on 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 his computer, and and one day when I said, "What are you watching?" he said, "Well, I'm looking for cheats, and I'm looking for ways to get better, because there's some there's some things I just can't, get past. And so, I started to discover it wasn't just my son doing this, it was all of his friends. And I noticed that the young people, just these little kids, were being self-learners. They were acting in ways that people in my generation and older were not even acting in. For us, if we wanted to learn something, we went and took a class. Maybe we read books, but as far as this active learning just as little kids, that's more part of the new generation. And so there's a lot we can learn from them. And just again, as a side note, what I've noticed is that those kids, as long as they take that self-learning experience and extrapolate it to other things. So my son now, he's not playing video games anymore, he's teaching himself guitar and saxophone and other skills, so applying what he learned from video games to other things in the world. And I believe we have Alexis. Alexis is a great example. I don't know how long he's been playing video games, but he's definitely part of that self-directed, self-learning generation who is now one of our most valuable members at app with what he's been able to contribute. So here, getting back to the subject of this learning curve here, what I noticed about this one was where it says here documented. We learn obvious things. We are tutored. There's documented, and then we enter into a zone where we both don't understand, and we hit things that are not documented. And I feel like that's what is happening with the app community right now, and those of us who are acting as informal researchers. We have entered into territory where there really isn't anybody to tell us exactly what's going on. We are really in the middle of understanding the whole phenomenon of displacement, understanding what works, and so many different things. And that's really a pretty exciting place to be in. Now, this slide, this to me actually brought up some emotions. And I'm just going to read a few parts of it. Art is now this is talking about art. So I want you to just replace the word art with remote viewing. Art is a cycle. So remote viewing is a cycle. Sometimes you draw really well, and then sometimes you feel like you can't draw at all. In reality, you are always slowly improving. It's just the cycle of seeing versus drawing that makes you think you are doing worse. And essentially what starts to happen, right here it says the actual skill is steady, but your art seems steadily worse. It's just your ability to perceive art is getting better, so you can criticize your own art better. So that is something that I'm really noticing. I noticed this with myself. 5 years ago, when I started in remote viewing and associative remote viewing, if I even just got one or two things that matched with the photo, I was really happy. Now I'm at the point where if I miss one or two things, or let's say I get half right and half wrong, I am not very happy. So I know I tend to be very hard on myself, and I know a lot of other people are too. And you can see with this curve, the curve is not straight. And that was really the theme of all, with so many of these curves that I found in Google Images, was it's not a straight line. There are ups and there are downs. Here is another one, and this made me ask, where are we in app, ARV, and even with Firefly? And if you look at the left, at the bottom, it says neat. It's this is exciting. And then we drop down and maybe we have some misses or we have a lot of passes and we say, what? This is so lame. And then we have some hits. Oh, this is pretty sweet. And then I can't believe how difficult they make some of this stuff. Are you kidding me? So that there's always these ups and downs. And then halfway through the curve, there's always not just questioning of oneself as a viewer, but when you work in a group, you just naturally start questioning everything else and what everyone else is doing. We've made a horrible choice. We should have went with this or that. This is doomed. And then we have some hits. Oh, this is very cool. But as you see, there's the ups and downs. But as you keep going upward, there is an increasing trend. And so that's where ultimately we're going. We're going to the point where we can look back and we can say, wow, we have come a really long way. And there were so many ups and downs. And there were so many times where we maybe thought, let's just throw in the towel. Why are we even wasting our time? Because this just doesn't, we're not getting this consistent. And I am completely certain that we are going to reach that highest point where we're like, this is the most awesome process ever. And as all of you know who've been doing this for any period of time, if you imagine yourself on this timeline, whether where you are right at this very day is at the top of one of these curves or at the bottom point, wherever you happen to be feeling or perceiving yourself, when you think of yourself where you started at the bottom and wherever you are now, where you are in your level of growth and understanding and how much you've learned and how much you've developed, I'd really just like everybody to take a moment right now and tune into that for yourself, because wherever you are on here, you are at least a little bit further up than where you were when you started, and most of you are so way more up on this line, having accomplished so much. So just take a couple moments or take the rest of your life and just congratulate yourself for that. All right, be a curve jumper. I really like this slide I found. Again, this was talking in terms of video game technology, but it applies here. Find hacks to accelerate your early learning. Start developing new skills way in advance of plateauing on your existing ones. So that's what we need to do. Even though a lot of us know how to remote view, we know that many times we can effectively put our attention on a photo and we're going to be able to describe some aspects of it. Even though we know that we can have success, there is absolutely no reason for any one of us to stop our learning, to stop training, to stop learning new techniques, new approaches, both to our remote viewing and to our associative remote viewing. There's no reason to think that however we are now, that we can't grow tremendously. And that doesn't matter whether you are brand new or have been doing this for 20 years. If you've been doing this for 90 years, there is still so much to learn. And fortunately, again, we have brand new people coming in to remote viewing and into app, not just new viewers, but new human beings. We have part of the younger generation. Their minds are more supple. Their minds are able to perceive things and understand the world around them that our older minds, and I'm speaking as someone who's just about 47 years old, but even in comparison, my mind is not set up in the same way that a 20-year-old's mind is, thank God, because they are much more prepared for the new challenges, technologically speaking and elsewise. And I believe even as far as remote viewing, that they can offer things and see things from a perspective that we older people just can't see. And so we need those of you that are part of that younger generation, we need you, and we need to keep bringing in people from that, because that's where we're going to really be able to learn from those people. But at the same time, those of us who are older and have been around, we have a historical perspective, and we have a lot to teach the younger generation. That they need training as well, so we can work together. So don't be afraid. It takes courage to jump from one curve to the next. Staying in the comfort zone is easy, but greatness happens when you escape from it. So I love this concept here because what we're doing in app right now, we just had a big curve jump. We just went from ARV for fun to ARV for Firefly. And Firefly puts a whole new spin on things. And yes, it does put it has different implications. It has wonderful, incredible implications, but it can create extra stress on the system. And so again, jumping curves is analogous to changing paradigms, and it's never completely smoothless or seamless. So let go of what you know so you can learn something new. I really love this slide. With everything that we thought we knew, the more we can apply what we know. But then what this is saying, I don't believe we have to forget our knowledge, but what we have to do is get emotionally detached to it. And part of what follows here, I'll demonstrate for myself, where I thought I knew what was leading to displacement, and I really thought it had to do mostly with protocols. And now my attitude is, no, it's really a part of what we're bringing to the table on a personal level. So I found some different images of people that I thought were fairly different from each other. The two ladies might be fairly alike in this grouping, but we have Arnold Schwarzenegger, Lady Gaga, uh, Albert Einstein, and then just a sparkly, glittery lady. And so, one of the things I've noticed is that, again, in order to learn and make sense of everything, we try to come up with theories. And theories and laws are saying how the world works and how we work. And we're trying to find these rules that we could apply that will help us. But in doing so, we have to be careful to realize that people are very different. We have so many similarities, but we have a lot of differences. That's why we have someone who can be a ballerina and someone else that can be a mathematician or physicist. We've got some people who could do both, be a physicist and be a ballerina. But there are some different levels in. There's a lot of different ways we approach life. And what may work for one person may be completely different for somebody else. And this is very important as far as discussions around how people are trained, how people approach a session. And I believe that this is very important when we talk about the subject of displacement, because some people may be encountering displacement more than others due to their own personality makeup. And that may even be why you see some people having more displacement. There may be just some people that are just overall more vulnerable to viewing everything as opposed to just what they're being told to view. Whereas there may be some people that they're told to view something, or there's the idea they view something very specific, and they have an easier time with that. But I believe everybody is vulnerable to viewing the wrong thing. It's really about attention. If you think about it right now, just during the course of this webinar, my intention is for you to be listening to my voice, paying absolute, complete attention to me, seeing exactly what's on my screen. Well, how many of you just in the past hour alone, how many times has your attention gone away from what I was talking about to something in your room, something in your house, something about yourself? Your mind has drifted off to other things where you even realized for a minute or two you weren't even listening to me. Your attention goes all over the place. We know that about meditating. That's why people find meditating frustrating. And I always say the whole purpose of meditating is to just get your mind focused. It's not that you're supposed to be focused when you meditate or you're failing. Meditation is the process to just make that mind, that monkey mind that wants to go all over the place all the time. So really, when you think of displacement like that, all displacement is your attention's going to the wrong thing and you're learning how to focus better. So there are people that can sit in a classroom and pay attention to the majority of what their teacher is saying. Then there's other people that can barely keep their attention for a moment. And some of it has to do with some people can subject themselves to things that are more boring better than others. So displacement, there are external factors and there are internal factors. And I will just be very, very briefly talking about the external factors, but these include the protocols. How are we conducting our what methods are we using to implement our associative remote viewing? Protocols would include, well, you'll see different protocols for different groups. So as part of a protocol, that would include how many viewers are being used. Are viewers receiving the predictions? Are viewers self-judging, or who is doing the judging? What scores are being used? Those are all the things that make up the ARV protocols. Other external factors, human error. Maybe somebody with sports wagering, it was an over-under bet, and they accidentally thought that the cutoff point was like 5, but it was really 4, something like that. So just human errors can lead to both displacement or missing the target. Unforeseen circumstances. Just maybe when we were doing horse racing years ago as a group, one thing that would happen is occasionally a particular horse that was paired with one of the photos, that horse ended up getting injured and not participating in the race. And so there were different ways to deal with that when we realized that was happening, but that was an unforeseen circumstance. And so that just kind of messed things up. Sloppy communication. This would be when people, maybe someone is expecting to receive a feedback photo from a manager, and then the manager sends another photo about another target to the viewers that were just waiting to receive the feedback. Or they, and I know no one would do this in here, but even sending an email with the feedback photo, but then another photo for another target, that would be considered sloppy communication, and it could lead the viewer to having viewed the wrong thing. And then there's mysteries of the universe and what I call time burps. And I really don't know what a time burp is, but it just was a term that came to me, that there's a theory that maybe just something gets messed up on the timeline. And there's so much we don't really understand about time. And for all we know, there could be some really big, huge thing about the way that the universe or life or time works, that is having an impact on us that we just don't understand. That's not something we're going to spend too much time contemplating today, because we want to get to the internal factors. So internal factors: misunderstanding ARV and protocols, personal motivations and goals. Something that I will discuss in detail in a few moments is arousal and drive reduction needs and behaviors. One's level of empathy and other-centeredness, which I believe actually can increase one's tendency to displace. One's desire for approval or appreciation, and rushing and burnout. And as you're looking at these two lists, again, you might just think about, well, how does where do I fall in on these different factors? Am I somebody that is very empathetic and other-centeredness and caring about their approval and what they think? Or am I someone that doesn't really care about that too much? All right, so I wanted to start, I had actually put this towards the end of the presentation, but personally, I have found that what I have on this slide is what seems to lead to displacement for me personally than anything else. And in that experiment I was talking about that wasn't ARV but was RV, it was for a parapsychologist called Stanley Krippner, and I just finished up last week 25 sessions. And for that, we were self-judging. And as I mentioned earlier, so far I've received feedback for 16 of the sessions, and 13 would have been considered hits, or are I'd consider them a hit because I chose the photos and described those a lot more than the other photos that were not the ones that we were supposed to be viewing. For this experiment, for the Krippner experiment, we were told there was a picture in an envelope at a location. It was at a house in Northern California, and there was an envelope. And for each trial, the period would last a couple days, and we were told we needed to send ourselves over to the envelope and describe the picture in the envelope. And then immediately at the end of that 2-day trial period, we would be sent 2 photos to self-judge and compare our sessions to. And so out of the 16, I had 13 that seemed like good hits. And out of the 3 that weren't good hits, I noticed that these exact elements were at play. I had done my session at the last minute. I was rushing. I was feeling like not enough time. I was going really fast. Even if I took longer for my session, I may have still stayed in session for about 15 minutes or so, although my other sessions were longer. But it was just a matter of feeling distracted, feeling obligated. For this experiment, we were told that if we completed all of our sessions, which was 20, but then it ended up being a little bit more. But if we completed at least 20, we were going to be paid $300. And $300 is really not a whole lot for 20 sessions, but that's more than anyone's ever paid me for a remote viewing experiment. And I definitely didn't want to lose out on that money. So I was rushing and distracted and did my session anyway. And so look at these things here, because you might just start to pay attention. If I'm sure some of you would already acknowledge that this is a factor, but if you haven't, you might want to just really pay attention to this. And so how do we avoid these behaviors? How do we avoid, oops, how do we avoid it when we find that we promised that we were going to do a session, it was all planned out, and yet when it came down to it, we just didn't really have enough time, and now we're feeling obligated because people are counting on us? Well, we can avoid these behaviors by discussing up front with our group managers and our teammates how it will be handled when we get into this situation. And I would be very surprised if not everybody sometimes is in this situation, if not a lot. We all have busy lives and things come up unexpected. So if you already had a plan in place, and I know that Marty has brought this up before to the groups as a whole, and that this does get discussed, and probably most group managers have even said to people, don't, if you don't have time, don't do it, don't rush. But I think that if there was even more of a formal process or even more discussion, like when this does come up, like like we really mean this, like we really mean do not do a session, even if the manager is like expecting it. In this case, there's now not just the group managers, but there's an added layer that the Firefly um, management, or at least people that are working with the wagers, they're waiting for the group managers to give them data. And so now there's another layer which may make people feel even more like, oh my gosh, I'm like not in a place to really do this, or I don't really have time, but now I'll be letting down even more people. But I think we really have to be super clear about this and understand that if our ultimate goal is to hit that bullseye, to view what needs to be doing and to have hits as opposed to misses, that this is more important than ever that we have this in place. And I would even go as far as suggesting that this isn't just about for viewers, but this is about for group managers. What does a group manager do who has a bunch of viewers turning in sessions, but maybe something just came up? They might have had an argument with their spouse, or maybe someone in their family got ill, or maybe they just didn't realize how busy that they were going to be and they are just exhausted. But now they have all these viewers turning in sessions. And now, even again with Firefly, now maybe there's even another level where they're needing to turn things in. So, do group managers have permission to take a break, or even what do they do if this is all set up? And of course, well, gosh, I don't want the manager might be like, I can't like not go through with this because the viewers just took all this time. Well, there are so many people in app and so many people who have experience with judging. What my suggestion would be is putting out a notice to the group saying, I have sessions to judge and I just don't feel up for it. And would someone like to help me? And I suspect that there are a lot of people that would love to have that experience of judging and helping out. Even myself, you can always ask me. I might be a little too busy, but for if someone's in another group, I personally do not want to be a group manager, but I enjoy judging sessions. And while I certainly can't commit to doing it on a regular basis as other people in app can't, I am sure there'd be at least a dozen people who would say, yes, I will help you out here, even though it's at the very last minute. So it's important that we do this. And I know that people are aware of this, but I think that a lot of times we just ignore it. And then the other thing is that there's going to be times where both viewers and group managers really just need to take a break for a while. And speaking from personal experience, it is so hard sometimes to do that. For me, I say I'm going to take a break, and then as soon as I hear something interesting going on, or someone puts out a call for viewers, or they're trying new protocols, or trying a new target pool, or they're like, we really need someone, I am just unable to keep my finger from hitting the keys on my keypad that says, yes, I will, and hitting the send button. So it takes every ounce of my being to not violate my own needs of saying, I just need a break. And when I don't do that, things sure enough start to go downhill. And I know that that's true with those of you. Some of you really have been needing to take a break for a very long time. And the cool thing is sometimes you may just really need a break for a couple weeks or for a month, or maybe you are just ready to take a whole new direction. Maybe you're a manager and you're just ready to be a viewer for a while, or maybe you've been viewing and you're ready to take on another role, or you just need a total break and there's some other way that you might be able to contribute to app or to Firefly without doing either role. So moving on here, I'm going to need to go a little faster here because I still have lots of slides. Moving on, leaping over false feedback. This is something I always have this vision of that we have a session and that we have our actual feedback. And with many of the protocols in the app groups, there's the potential for false feedback. Um, False feedback can be the prediction. So anytime there's any communication between the viewers and the managers, or viewers and other viewers in the group, or within other groups, there is the possibility that someone's attention that was supposed to go all the way over from all the way over into the future to the feedback moment, that's where our attention's supposed to go, right to the feedback moment, not just in the feedback moment, but to that feedback photo. That's what we're supposed to be describing. But if you think about it as if like your attention was a person leaping from one cliff to the other, and all you have to do is take a big jump and you leap right over. But what's in the middle? In the middle is a bunch of things that could distract you, where your attention can fall. It can fall before it reaches the other side of the cliff, and it can fall into the prediction. It can fall into attaching to the CR scores, to miscellaneous correspondence. When you watch a game for sports wagering, that can have an impact. Let's say you think like a certain outcome is gonna, maybe the teams are going a certain way and then they go another way, or somehow that could have an impact. I'm not saying it does, I'm just saying these are possibilities, and I think that occasionally this does happen. With wagering, if you are wagering or someone else on your team is wagering, maybe your attention might go to the photo attached to whatever is being wagered on. Self-judging, we know that this does happen, that occasionally we are viewing our photos that were given for judging rather than the actual true feedback. So I look at all of what's in the middle here on this slide as as false feedback. It can be false feedback if we look at this as feedback. So why today am I covering inner causes for displacement, as opposed to just like simply looking at these protocols that are involved, like let's say self-judging? Why is it more focused on the internal today? Well, that's because in life there are distractors, there are obstacles, and I think of it like a basketball game. In basketball, if there might be someone who's really, really good at throwing a ball into the net. And they can if they're standing there in a room, in a quiet room all by themselves with a basket, they can get 100 balls in, 500, and barely have any misses. And that's terrific. That person is talented. But if they are someone who cannot get the ball in when there are other people on the court trying to block them from getting the ball in and distracting them, and if they can't throw the ball in even when there's onlookers sitting around with all those distractions, then they are not going to be effective, and they are not going to be able to do what's needed to win the game, and to pretty much it's going to be a disaster. So people who can do what they need to do despite all of those distractions and obstacles are going to be most effective. So just like we have um, our basketball friend here, it would be pretty ridiculous for him to be crying, "Mommy, she stole my ball," when the ball's taken out of his hands. You could look at it like maybe it's kind of silly that some of us, myself included, have been crying and complaining that there are protocols that are distractors, like self-judging and different kinds of wagering going on, and different communications about predictions and stuff like that. Maybe it's just as silly to be crying about those things instead of saying, well, how can I learn to get the ball in no matter what? Internal factors, I just want to go over a few internal factors. And we're going to be getting to viewing a target here in just a couple minutes because we're going to practice. It's going to be a very short session that we're going to be doing in a few minutes. So I hope you all can stay. It looks like the webinar may end up going as long as I thought for which will be another 45 minutes. But I have a very short remote viewing session planned with the purpose of seeing if you can view the correct thing as opposed to the distractors that may come up, and that's going to come up in just a minute. So I'm going to go a little faster through these next slides. But there's a few internal factors to be aware of. And one of the things I'm noticing is that there's always constantly newer viewers coming into app, and that's a terrific thing. And we want to support them, and we want to include them. But again, there's such a big learning curve just understanding what this is all about. I think I understand it all after 5 years, and then I suddenly find myself being confused over something. So does the newer viewer understand the entire process of what is being required here? Do they really understand that the end goal is viewing the feedback and not all those other points in the ARV process, which I'm calling false feedback? They could be potential points of false feedback if someone looks at them as such. And sometimes, if a newer viewer doesn't understand the process, and they do a session and they're handed photos to view, or the computer generates a couple photos, one being a decoy target. It's not what they were viewing, but they're just supposed to, the other one is the non-actualized one as far as ARV is concerned. If they don't understand that, they're going to see both of those feedback photos and be like, oh, great, here's my feedback, and look, my session matches these. So it is really important that we make sure that newer viewers understand the process, and that everything's communicated clearly. And because there is this learning process, and we don't want to put pressure on newer viewers because that pressure will get in the way of their fun and of their learning, we may want to um, we may want to handle it in different ways. And one way might be to set them up as what would be called a trial viewer, where they're simply, they could still be part of the larger group, but what they're doing is considered trial sessions. And so those sessions may not get included either in Firefly. They may not get included in the overall statistics. And I would say, for the sake of research, and just I believe that this is oftentimes a problem in all of parapsychology research involving viewers or psychics, that the brand new people and the less experienced people, their sessions will sometimes drive down, or oftentimes drive down, the overall results. And so one way to handle that nicely, to not isolate them, so because we want their skills to keep coming up and we want their participation, would be to somehow establish them as trial viewers or trial sessions, or something like that. I don't know exactly how that would be carried out, but just something to be aware of it, and that managers may really need to take more time to educate those newer viewers. And I sometimes personally get emails from people saying, I just really don't understand this process. Can you explain it to me? And while I'm always personally happy to do that, just so anyone knows, you can always get in touch with me and I'll do my best. But now with so many groups, there are certain protocols that I myself don't understand. And again, anyone joining right now, if you can just mute yourself. I'm hearing a little bit of interference, so if you can mute yourself, that little microphone next to you, that would be appreciated. All right, so this is really what I want to get into. And this speaks directly to why do we often displace? And why might we why might we have a tendency to displace on photos that we might self-judge? And I really want you to think about this, just all of you right now. My question for you is to think about, how do you feel when you, let's say, if you self-judge, I think most of you probably have done this, where you're shown right after you view or sometime after, you're shown two photos and you're told, well, look to see which one your session matches, and it should only be one. Well, I want you to think about either the last time you did this, or how you tend to be. Do you look forward to getting those photos that you're going to self-judge? Do you get kind of excited when you know, like, oh, I now get to see these two photos? If you feel any kind of excitement about that, or even any kind of feelings like, oh, like now I get to know at least one of these is what I was viewing. So if you feel that way, um, I would suggest that you may be entering into the danger zone, because what's happening is a part of you is actually seeing those judging photos. A part of you is actually on a deeper subconscious level. Some of it may be conscious, but some of it may be subconscious, that you are experiencing those as your feedback, and that they become false feedback. And I'm not just pointing out self-judging, but I'm pointing out, but this would refer to maybe other steps in the process too, where even, do you feel excited when you see the CR scores from your group? If your manager sends you the scores ahead of time, and maybe showing like, oh, this many people said it was going to be over, or this many people said it was going to be under, is there a part of you that gets excited about that and has some feeling like maybe now you know which one it was? If there's any part of that, again, that may be the part of you that is leading you into the realm of displacing. And so, like I said before, we can look at it two ways. We could just say, well, we're going to remove those from the protocols, or we can say, how can we improve this? And as Marty's pointed out, he feels that displacement happens as much with independent judgers as it does with self-judgers. So right now, I'm just this isn't about discussing should we have those protocols or not. It's about how do you react to them. So one of the things I started, I'm giving you a theory here, Hull's drive reduction theory, and how it offers insight into displacement. But I'll just say that I started to become aware of this personally when I tuned in a few weeks ago and said psychically, like, what's really going on? What could I learn on an intuitive level about this whole process? And I became aware of this. And then I started to do research into psychology to see if there was a theory that matched this. And so his theory is, when survival is in jeopardy, the organism is in a state of need. So the organism behaves in a fashion to reduce that need. In stimulus response relationship, when the stimulus and response are followed by a reduction in the need, it increases the likelihood that the same stimulus will elicit the same response again in the future. And so what this may be talking about is that we keep having displacement because we keep having the same stimulus, the same needs, and the same resolution of those needs. So stress, arousal, and relief in RV. Arousal in arousal in psychological terms means an increase in physiological processes, an increase or of intensity of emotions, and of various mental processes. And I want you to think about when you're doing a remote viewing session, whether or not you feel confident as a viewer, or most of us here know that we can view, that's not a doubt. But in RV, no matter how experienced we are, many of us experience a certain level of internal stress. On some level, doing sessions can be stressful. Even that's one reason why it's helpful to do a cool down, um, and to be as relaxed as possible. But even in doing so, probably all of you, if you really think about it, you will notice that when you do sessions, there is some level, some part of yourself that sometimes feels what could be thought of as stress or confusion. Of course, the confusion is a response of your analytical mind, because it's really not supposed to be that your analytical mind is present, but I say supposed to because we just know that's what happens. And if you find yourself confused, that does mean, by the way, that you're too much in your analytical mind at the moment, because the subconscious psychic part of you can't be confused. Confusion is a part of the analytical mind, but it's a response within the session. Sometimes another way of saying it is you're bewildered. What the heck is this that I've been given? You feel unsure. You may feel worried. You feel nervous. So all of these things, these are what creates arousal. Your emotions are going. That your heart may be beating a bit. I haven't really seen. I'm sure there's research on this with remote viewers. I haven't seen really research that has tested the physiological um, aspect of people doing ARV. I think what's happening in ARV actually may be even more stressful, because we're aware that there's something else that we're not supposed to be seeing. And I think that creates even an additional stress level. And here I have two columns, and this isn't by accident. This isn't an error here. There's the same exact things that might happen for remote viewers that happen to project managers. Now, or to group managers. And since I haven't been an official group manager for quite a while, I'm not really privy to what they're all doing. But my suggestion, I think that the group managers really need to have some group therapy sessions, or sessions where they can come together. And I know this has maybe been done once or twice, but just a suggestion that you all may want to do this even more and really get into how you're feeling and what you're dealing with and the stressors, because there is definitely stress being a group manager, as enlightening as it is. And that stress may even be, again, a little bit more heightened with the addition of Firefly, which, again, is no reason to say we shouldn't have Firefly. It's part of our evolution. And so we just need to be aware of all of this. Okay, so here we have all this stress, and we're wondering and nervous and confused and excited. Now, seeing the feedback. When we see the feedback, not only do we intellectually get to know and understand, but again, moving to those feelings, we have a feeling of our stress being relieved. And so, again, as I'm talking, I really want you to think about your own self and what it feels like. Now, I understand that if you see your feedback and it doesn't match, your stress level, I believe, goes even higher. And I didn't have time to draw that up as a graph. I think that'd be kind of an interesting visual graph. But initially, at least, there is a reduction in the stress you were feeling before. And of course, if you see there's a match, then the stress really goes down. So I suspect that if you see there's a match, it goes way down. If you see that there's not a match, it might peak even way higher than when you were in your session. That this is all just my theory at the moment. I don't have much to back it up, but I would be really surprised if physiological tests didn't show this. So senior feedback relieves stress. It reduces the original arousal levels, while it can raise new ones. It may even raise adrenaline levels. It reduces confusion. It provides closure. It can lead to wonderful feelings of accomplishment and success. And of course, if you wagered and you made some money, that even makes you feel even better. You may feel like really ecstatic. The highest levels of arousal stress adrenaline may actually happen right before seeing the feedback. And now again, thinking about yourselves, why do we even do this? Why do we even do this silly thing called remote viewing? Particularly those of us like myself, I didn't really care about wagering, but I'm a bit addicted to remote viewing, and I know many others here are as well. Why do we do this thing, especially with viewing photos and stuff? Well, there's many different reasons, but I've become aware that I really find these like lows and highs exciting, and I love how I feel when I see my feedback, especially when it's correct. When it's not correct, as my own group managers know, I can like get a little nutty and send them too many emails and ask like, oh, why did this happen? Why did that happen? But when I see a match, I am really happy. So this process is true for myself, and I'm just wondering how for you, how many of it is true for you too? And I suspect it is for a lot, and we cannot ignore this because feedback is a drug. It's like two lovers, and nothing can keep them apart. So the idea of getting feedback becomes intoxicating, whether intoxicating like a drug or like love that we have to pull to us. So we feel like we need the feedback. And we know, of course, in associative remote viewing, since it's the feedback we're viewing, um, that we're viewing the event in advance so that people can make a prediction. Feedback is important, but from a psychological perspective, you don't need feedback to effectively view. You don't need feedback immediately, even in the ARV process. While it may help to get your feedback immediately, you don't have to have it, but you feel like you want it immediately. So for some of us, Oreo cookies or other chocolate or wonderful things to eat may be something that is really hard to not grab a hold of when it's right there for us to grab a hold of. And some people, if I'm on a diet and I've just announced to everyone in my house that I am on a diet, I'm only eating vegetables, and then they put a big bag of double stuffed Oreo cookies with a cold glass of milk in front of you, in front of me, I can tell you that there is a 99.9 chance that I will, within 10 seconds, reach for at least two of those Oreos and dunk it in the milk. So I know personally that I have a very hard time delaying that gratification and saying, okay, well, I'll have an Oreo 6 months from now when I'm at my goal weight. I just have a real hard time doing that. Other people, even if they love Oreo cookies as much as me, may have no problem at all. They could sit there for an hour smelling those cookies, having everyone else sit at the table and eat them, and it will not faze them. So that is what I am suggesting with certain viewers, that some may be able to delay the emotional need to see their feedback and just wait. They may be better at doing that, or they may be able to train themselves when they understand what the triggers are and understand this arousal and decrease of arousal process. So that's why I'm discussing it here right now. There may be some who just cannot avoid reaching for those cookies or reaching for that, what I was calling false feedback, which again I've repeated here, falling for the false feedback, which again could be when you learn about the prediction, does your attention go there? When you self-judge, does it go to the photos? So solutions, with all of this, what do we do with all of this? Well, Marty, our fearless leader, he would just say, don't do that. Stop viewing the wrong thing. Don't do that. And yeah, we need to tell ourselves that. However, I could tell myself, don't do that. Don't reach for that cookie. But that's going to be really, really hard. In the same way that Romeo and Juliet might have been able to logically tell themselves, it doesn't really make a whole lot of sense to try to be together. We are ruining our future, but they just couldn't help it. And as you can see with that story, things didn't necessarily end all that well for them. So, solutions. First, the viewer and the project manager, both, they need to know themselves. They need to know their inner motivations and work with them. I don't have all the answers here, but it's something to be aware of. And then also knowing each other, knowing what each other's vulnerabilities are, and that may then lead to either certain viewers being involved in certain groups that do certain protocols. There may be just different choices once people know these things. The other thing here that I really want to emphasize, again, instead of changing the protocols or avoiding certain ones, maybe finding a way to decrease the reward of false feedback. And I'll explain that in just a minute. Applying adverse conditioning to false feedback, operant conditioning, these are psychological terms. Increasing positive reinforcement when the viewer hits the correct target. But basically, adverse conditioning would be that really, other than that there is a miss that's created, maybe that there's some way that we can make it so that, especially for self-judging, that the self-judging process, the relief that provides, maybe it could be changed where it doesn't provide relief. Maybe whether you increase anxiety at that point, I don't know if that would really be a good idea. But one idea I had, let me see if I put it down here. Let me see if I could explain this. One idea I had was if you built into a protocol for self-judging that maybe sometimes neither photo is that which were viewing. So if the viewer knew that when they are given photos to self-judge, that maybe maybe neither of the photos are what they were viewing. Maybe that would psychologically say to them that this isn't any kind of feedback. This has nothing to do with feedback. Somehow that might help. Okay, so don't underestimate survival needs. Again, psychology looks at how people, their innate need to survive, their innate impulses many times takes over the brain that gives them directives and tells them what to focus on. So the need to recognize and make sense of one's environment. I believe that this plays a role in our viewing of targets, and I don't think that it's really been discussed that much in the literature on remote viewing, but that I've found over the years that a recognizable target that can be named is an attractor to both viewers and judges. So for example, if I have two photos and one photo is clearly of a house with trees on it, and the other photo is some very abstract, maybe it's like a close-up view of some rocks. Even if the rocks make up a very distinctive pattern, like let's say it was a crisscross pattern, and maybe the rocks were bright red, which that could be considered a really strong target because there's red and there's a really definable pattern. That might be helpful. But let's say it's a close up, and if you were to show this photo to someone with their eyes open, initially they might be like, well, what the heck is that? On the other hand, when you show them with their eyes open the photo of where they can say immediately without barely looking at it, oh, that's a house with some trees. Well, I think that, and I'm saying thinking because I've done a lot of with my own students where over the phone I gave them different targets, and I started to notice this, um, what I'm talking about here. So this is based on some informal, you could say some informal research I've done. But what I found is that they will be far more likely to describe what they could have identified clearly with their eyes open. And because our survival needs are dependent on us very quickly being able to enter into any situation and sum up what's going on. In fact, that's one reason why I believe we get into stereotypes. We have to make split-second decisions many times. Our lives are dependent on it. Our lives were dependent on it years ago, and even today, such as when you're driving, if you weren't able to so quickly make a split second assessment of your environment, you would not even be able to get down the road without having an accident. And so I believe that this is why our minds will generate AOLs. For those of you familiar with CRV terminology, analytic overlay, our minds just immediately generate something so we can make sense of what's going on. And I believe that this may have an impact on what we're more likely to view. It may also really have an impact on group managers and when and their connection with different sessions and photos, and their inclinations sometimes to maybe give a higher score to a certain target. And that's the other thing. Next is judges may imprint on the first session or picture that they see. And I can tell you, when I have judged and been a group manager or just simply judged, I became very aware, and this was, let me say, both as a self judge and judging others. I became aware that sometimes I formed an immediate emotional attachment to the very first photo, especially if it was one that I liked. So it might be the first one simply because it was the first one, or it may be because there was one I personally liked better. And when you put the two together, that I saw the one I liked better first, and maybe I saw one viewer's session that really seemed to match it, and then other viewer sessions came after that matched the other one, I formed an attachment. And I have to say, not to talk about other people that I respect, but I have observed Joe McMoneagle during the last couple app webinars. I made a point of being in the room when he was judging so I could learn as much as possible about his process, and I believe that I witnessed him having these same tendencies as well. So something to be aware of. Um, the need for love and attention and approval and connection, we cannot underestimate that. The connection that we have, viewers have with their group managers and also with each other. And our attachment to our group managers and to our other team members may actually cause displacement and other problems. And it's just something to be aware of. If I was going to run a formal research study at this point, I would not want my viewers to know who was tasking them or who was judging them, because I've seen that connection can get very messy. And when I open it up for discussion here, and I'm sorry, I have so much to get through, and I really planned that this was going to be about discussion. And here I've just been blabbing on for way too long, but I know that some of you have some great input here to add. How to connect with the actual feedback photo. Connecting through visualization, intention, and emotion. Connecting with your current self and future self. Connecting in time. There are many different things you can do to connect with the actual feedback photo. And this is really one of the main reasons why I wanted us to come here today. Again, I didn't realize how much I had to get through. But so here are some tips, and we're actually going to go and do this right now. Deciding, there's been a lot of talk, which is fantastic. I 100% agree with Marty and with Scott with what they brought up in the webinar. And if you haven't heard it, definitely it was just presented by Scott again in the app discussion email list. So you should really listen to that webinar. There were so many great things in there. And Marty for a long time has been emphasizing taking time with the feedback session. And because he's emphasized it, I'm not going to focus on that so much. What I want to focus on is what is happening during the cool down session. In particular, what's happening before you do your session and how do you set it up. And one of the things that I have found in when I do this, I've had better success with hitting the actual target, viewing the actual feedback photo is what I do prior to the actual session. And one of the things I've found is that these days we're receiving everything through our computers. We're receiving all of the correspondence. We may be receiving the judging photos. We're receiving the feedback and the tasking all on our same computers, all through our same email inbox. And so what seems to help is having your feedback, having it be displayed in a different place than everything else. So one thing that I would suggest is that you can first making this decision before you do anything else is making the decision, where are you going to view your feedback on? And this would be my suggestion. If you could print out your feedback, maybe even before you see it, I don't know how possible that is, but you could print out your feedback and you could put it in an envelope and know that you're going to see your feedback. Whatever is in the envelope is what you're viewing. And so you could view what's in the envelope and put all of your attention on the envelope and imagine that you're pulling the photo out and that you're viewing what's in that envelope at that future date. And that envelope will very much separate out all this other stuff. So I would say that would be like my biggest suggestion. If you could do that, that would really help. When I've done that, I've had success, and that was pretty much following what I just did with this Stanley Krippner experiment with having a lot of hits, viewing it in an envelope. The other thing that you could do is have a separate computer monitor set up. Some of us have a few different computer monitors lying around the house, and so you could set up a separate computer monitor where at the time of feedback, you just view the feedback photo only on that monitor. The thing with this again is when you're at the start of your session, during your cool down period, you could direct your attention over to that monitor. So you could visualize the monitor in the same way with the envelope. Before you start your session, you do whatever cool down you would normally do, and then you visualize that monitor or that envelope. You send your attention there. You imagine what it's like to be there in the future when you're taking it out. So you could either send your whole self to the future or just and visualize yourself standing there with the envelope and monitor and how you feel when you're looking at the photo. You could actually visualize the entire feedback experience ahead of time. The only problem with that is I can tell you from direct experience that you might start to observe other things going on at the time, other interruptions, or if something gets in the way and you're not able to do that, it can mess things up. But I think the things that could get in the way are less important than the value of doing it like this. So simply printing out your feedback photo, right? But I would say doing this before you look at it. So you don't look at, what I'm talking about here is doing these before you actually look at it yourself. So you would print it out and have it like on your desk. So at the start of your session, you're visualizing yourself, you're visualizing that printout. And I would say know where that printout is going to be. So you may have it planned that you're going to print it out and you're going to hang it on your wall in a certain space. You could even write the words feedback and have that feedback number on your wall, like a sign that says the target number, and this is going to be my feedback. And you have that space designated on your wall, and you set that up, you go into your cool down phase, and then you visualize what's hanging on your wall underneath that target number that you've hung on your wall. So that would be like creating a placeholder. You could create a placeholder on your computer too, where you have a certain file and maybe like it's a certain color, or you have a file with a Word document that's all red, and then you paste the photo into that. I think that's a little bit less effective, but I think you get the general idea here. The other thing is that you could even have a special room that you call your feedback room. So it's the only time you maybe like go into that room, or you set the room up in a special way. So and that's where you view your feedback. So and this could work in conjunction with these other ideas. You print it out, you go sit in that room, and maybe either you do your session in that room, but you don't do anything else in that room. You don't like have email correspondence or anything. So actually putting yourself, designating a physical space for your body and working with it, like that could work. And then Marty, a long time ago, several years ago, came up with the beacon approach, which I really liked. It seemed to just kind of fizzle out, but it's the idea that you have an object at the time you do your session and you get this set up. So let's say your object was like a feather. It could be any object, a certain rock. You hold on to that feather or that rock, and you tell yourself, this very feather rock is what I'm going to have with me at the time I do my feedback. And then you do your session and you put that aside, and then you take those back out and you have those right with you when you're doing your feedback session. So that can be helpful as well. But I really think that the idea of putting it in an envelope or hanging it on your wall under the sign of the target number, or whatever the target number is for that particular one, I really think that's almost stronger. And maybe if you have an additional beacon with you, that could even make the process even stronger. The other thing is connecting in time. Traditionally, if you ask Lynne Buchanan, who teaches associative remote viewing, he hasn't been part of these app groups, but I know he's talked to Marty over the years, and he firmly believes that it's essential that you know what time you're getting your feedback for. I don't really know that that's his opinion. I don't think there's really enough evidence to say that's true or not, but I do believe that it's worth considering. Now, usually for feasibility reasons, that hasn't been done, because the idea of, well, you're going to receive your feedback at this exact time, or you're going to view your feedback at this exact time, means that both people have to show up and there's more involved. However, I do believe personally that there is enough merit to the possibility that if you tell someone, and actually Nancy and I did this week for a target, it didn't really work out so well, but but I still firmly believe in it. So we got together and Nancy looked at when when was the prediction going to be made, when would she get the feedback, because this was one of the ones for Firefly. And she said, okay, on Thursday morning at 9 a.m., I'm going to give you your feedback. And I already had it set up where I knew that. I had my alarm set. I knew I was going to see my feedback. I knew where I was going to view it. It was going to be on a different monitor than I usually use. I even had my target number taped to it. So using that process. So connecting in time and knowing the time to anticipate can be very helpful. Okay, so now we are going to do this next. We're actually going to do a target, and we're going to do this quickly. We may go over a little bit, and I very much apologize for that. I'm very happy to see we still have a lot of people here, so I hope that you can stay. And pretty much, because we have about 10 minutes left for our scheduled time, but we will go probably an additional 15 minutes. So I would love it if you could stay. If you cannot stay, the recording will be available. And I would now like to get this set up for you. So what we're going to do right now, I'm going to tell you that we're going to do a short remote viewing session. This is just a short remote viewing session. And remember, those of you that were at the last app conference in Henderson with Joe McMonigal, he led a one-day workshop, and he taught about that it is very easy to get the major gestalts of a target, just some aspects, very, very quickly in just a couple minutes. And that is very possible. And we showed ourselves over and over again that we can do that in little to no time if we're just wanting to get some basic perceptions. And so that is what we're going to do here, a very short session. And then after that session, you're going to be exposed to some decoys during the rest of the webinar, which will be pretty short because I have to move really quickly. But you will be exposed to decoys that are not what you're viewing. So your job here is going to be to view the exact target number, which I'm going to give you here in just a moment. And I'm going to help you get set up with a guided visualization of what to visualize. So I'd like everyone, just make sure you have some paper in front of you. And you're not going to have to turn this in or anything like that. You could use whatever remote viewing process that you would like. So the target number is target number 33333. It's a random number that I selected, and it is paired with a feedback picture, and that you will be seeing. When you see it, this is what I would call a placeholder, or this is what you should be starting to visualize, is that it will be the only slide that appears against the same black background. Actually, you'll see a black background right before the feedback and at a point in the future, and then you will see your feedback and it will appear on a black background. So you have the target number. It's the only picture, only communication from between now and the time you get your feedback, which will be within 15 minutes, 15 to 20 minutes. It's the only visual you're going to see on your computer coming up that is paired with target number 3333. So anything else that doesn't have 3333 preceding it is not going to be the thing that you're viewing and you don't care about, and you and your consciousness and subconscious are not going to notice. So the only thing you are going to notice is what's paired with the number 3333, 5 threes. It's going to be the only thing that's connected with up against a black background, with the exception that you will see a black background right before you then see the picture that's set up against the black background. So your task is to describe anything that is noticeable about that picture, anything you want to describe, anything that is relevant, and anything that matches what is being paired with target number 33333. So with that being said, I am just going to now be quiet while you, no, first let me do this. I forgot to do this. So I want you all to just close your eyes for a minute, even if you're going to open them back up again. Before you get started, wait. It's not time just yet to do the viewing because I want to get you set up here. You never want to just rush into a session. You want to make sure you're set up. So I want you to all visualize a black screen and visualize the black screen that I'm going to show you. So you could say you're visualizing the screen that you're going to see. You're seeing it on your own computer because I'm sharing my screen, but you can say this is the screen that I'm going to see and see it as black. And this is, and you could see, visualize the target number 33333. That's going to be also on your feedback photo. So or on your feedback picture, that's going to be the only numbers that are on there. And so you can see target number 3333 at the top, and it's very black. And this is the future one you're going to see, but there's no time and space, so you can connect with it right now. And now I'm going to be quiet, and if you would like to keep visualizing that screen and just see what shows up, that might be fun for some of you that use different techniques that want to try this technique. Or you can simply go to how you usually view and know that you're already primed and connected now to seeing what's connected to those numbers against that black backdrop. And so we'll be quiet for about 3 minutes while you do your session. Please proceed. And you may want to remind yourself during your session every once in a while that you are connecting with that black screen of the feedback photo that you'll be shown in the future. Just remind yourself or revisualize that. And remind yourself that this is going to come at a future point, about 20 minutes from now. I want to remind you to make sure that you sketch out anything that you've seen. I'd like everyone to have one sketch. At least one sketch. And then again, you might want to remind yourself that you're viewing only target number 33333 against the black background. Just ask if anything else can show itself that you've missed about the actual feedback, or that would be helpful to see. This is a good prompt to write. You could actually write on your paper either what am I missing or what do I really need to see. And you can write that on your paper and then just put your pen on that word and see what else comes up. And for anyone who's just joining us, we're doing a very short session, target number 3333. And then I'd just like you to do one more thing, is anything that you put on your paper, such as a sketch, if you have anything sketched out, if you haven't done this already, just put your pen on that sketch and probe it a bit more. Ask, what else can this show me? Whatever this sketch is representing. And just let go of whatever you think that sketch might be if your mind is generating any AOLs. But just put your pen on whatever you sketched. You could just put it in the center, or if you want to get information about any part of it, just put your pen there, take a few deep breaths, and just say, show me more details. I'm ready for more details about this. And we'll just take one more minute. All right, and let us wrap up. This is a very simple target, so it shouldn't take too much time. And so just wherever you are on the bottom of your paper, write session end. And know when you write session end that you are disconnecting. And you might even just set your pen down as a signal to your subconscious that you are really done. And if you went off anywhere, if a part of you or your consciousness left your body or floated over to my computer or anywhere else you might have gone, if any of you floated off into the future, allow yourselves to come back to where you currently are. Come back to your body and to yourself. And really give yourself full permission to detach. And this is as much for your own benefit, for your mental state, for your energy level, as it is for anything else. All right, so now you already did your target, and so everyone should be done. And I just want to check in with you. Are you guys all still with me? Is everyone still awake? Can you still hear me? I think you guys are on mute.
Yeah.
Okay.
Hi, Debra.
Okay, great. All right, so we're just going to have a little bit more discussion, and then you'll see your feedback. So just let go of that session for now. A couple other things that I felt I've been finding are really important. Um, and and some of the group, and if you guys could then just mute yourselves again, because now I'm noticing some static. Thank you. So I've had this discussion with my team members in our Sublime group. Our Sublime group has been together now for, gosh, 2.5 or 3 years. We're led by Nancy, and um, so I noticed this with myself, that I was engaging in behavior because I was trying to avoid passes. And this became very apparent. I was doing an 11-month experiment um, that was outside of app. It was working with one of the raters was Ed May, and we were using Ed May's CAS system, but the whole project was spearheaded by a man overseas. I think he's in Denmark, if I remember correctly. His name is Dick Bierman. So it was an ARV experiment, and I was the sole viewer doing cast targets. And in the end, I did about 45 targets. And I was noticing in some sessions, I was becoming extremely, extremely stressed. And now I have confirmation, um, and I'll explain that in a minute, but I have confirmation that there were times I was very aware I was viewing two photos at the same time. And my stress level, that wouldn't have been a problem, but because I so much didn't want to have passes, um, my stress level was going just off out of the roof, out of the universe. I was very, very stressed during those particular sessions when I was becoming aware that I was viewing more than just my feedback photo, and I was aware that that would not result in a hit. Part of the reason in that case why I had a couple of things going on. One, I was very much wanting to demonstrate that I could do this. I really wanted the experiment to be successful, which I realized subsequently that when you're doing an experiment, you're really, even as a subject, you're supposed to be neutral. You're not supposed to be trying to make a certain outcome happen. You're just you're just running through the protocols to see like what happens when you do this, what are the results. But I really wanted to have hits. I was working with guys that I had respected for a long time, so I had performance anxiety. And I also, one of the problems with the design of their ARV experiment was that Dick Bierman had decided that he needed so many trials that were not, he needed so many wagerable trials in order to complete the experiment. So we were using CAS, the computer system that Ed May developed, and CAS, for those of you, I think you're pretty familiar, so I won't really go into it much, except to say that CAS has its computer scoring, and it will tell you, it'll give you a score based on was your session stronger for the right one, and how much was it for which photo, and then it'll generate a figure of merit score, and then they'll look at it and say, well, is the computer saying that her session matched this like about 85%. Sometimes it's set at 90. I think ours was more at 85%. If it is 85% more for one photo than the other, that would be considered a session that could be wagered on. And so approximately, we had a few practice trials. So I would say the results of that were that out of approximately 40 trials, about half of them were wagerable. So about half of them were considered to be above the like 85% mark towards one, and then 20 of those were wagered on. But the thing was, when I was going through this whole process, when I started this, I didn't realize how long this project was going to go for. And I also didn't realize that this could continue to go on indefinitely if I didn't get 20 sessions that were strong enough for one side. It wasn't that we were doing a total of 20 or a total of 40 sessions and that would be it. So if I had the more passes, every time I had a pass meant that I had to go through this another week and I couldn't be done. The other thing was that they did not want to tell me if these were hits or misses when they were wagering. They were trying to have very strict protocols. And if you think back to what I said before, where I used to be the kind of person who said, we just need to tweak the protocols and this is going to end displacement. And I used to be under the belief that if the viewer didn't know anything, they didn't know the prediction, they didn't know what was being wagered on, if they didn't know anything other than all they did was their session and all they did was get their feedback, that would be the ideal situation. Well, when I was finally given that opportunity with this experiment with Dick and Ed, they wouldn't tell me anything other than I did my session and I get my feedback later. I do get to see my feedback photo, but nothing else. So it was this tension that was built up. And so I was doing everything I could to get through this, which meant to eliminate passes. And as it turned out, not only did that create stress, but out of the 20 wagerable ones, the 20 playable trials, half of mine were hits and half of mine were misses. And I believe that there were a few reasons for the misses. One was that I was trying too hard. Two was that actually I started to record my feelings, my viewer confidence ratings, about how I felt about each session, and 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 I shared these with them, but they were pretty much like ignored. So they didn't really care about that. I in the end I had 19 recorded, and when I compared my viewer confidence scores to the hits and to the misses, there was 100% correspondence. So every time I had a relaxed, this is terrific session, it was a hit. Every time I had this is a stressed out, problematic session, it was either a miss or a pass. And when it was really heightened, this is a problem, it was a miss. So that's both kind of a side note for why I know that they've just recently reinstituted in the we groups viewer confidence ratings. That in addition to what the data that Mark has put together recently to show that when the we groups did have that built in their protocols, that viewers were giving their impressions of their feelings and their confidence, there was a much higher hit rate. So that altogether is my vote for why I think that project managers or group managers and viewers should pay attention to that. But I also want you to really become aware of how you are feeling about passes. And when I took a poll of my Sublime group a while ago, I was surprised to find that everybody seemed to indicate that passes were something that they didn't like. So what I'd like you to just do, and you probably have since you've been seeing my screen here, is to just tune into yourself and ask yourself, how do I feel about passes? And and again, we're kind of short on time here, so I had planned to really pause and then have a discussion around this. But this is something that you could do, and maybe have been doing as I'm talking, or when we're done, is just take some time in dialogue with your subconscious and ask your subconscious, how does it feel when you in particular get a pass? Or how does it feel when your group gets a pass? And what you may find, and if you don't, the goal is to get yourself to the point where you don't feel this way. But before you get to that point or figure out how to get to that point, and I don't even know really how to get you to that point other than to start being aware of it. And to start like chant, you may be able to do like some meditations or some visualizations where you really start to see passes as your friends. But
a lot of people find passes disappointing, frustrating, depressing, a waste of time, something to avoid. And some people do avoid them. They just say, you know what, I'm not going to accept this pass. I'm just going to wager on my own. Now, that may be just fine. And I've actually done that myself when we were in Vegas at conferences, and the official prediction was a pass, but I went and wagered on my own. At the same time, though, I did have to wonder if different individual members are wagering on their own against the group prediction, could this have a retroactive effect on the process itself and what happened at viewing time? I don't have any evidence to that, but I believe that is a question that needs to be worth asking. And I feel like it hasn't really been asked for the reason I stated before, that typically wagering has been seen as a very private matter. It's rude in American society to ask people about what they're doing with their own money and money choices, and maybe that's entered into the group. But I can tell you, if I'm taking a lot of time to do sessions and to participate, and maybe even with Firefly now, where different, a lot of us have put in money. I would just like to know that if there are people doing individual wagers, and if that has some income. Of course, we can't control what people are doing, but I would just say that that's something that even those of you who are doing individual wagering, you might want to maybe look at that. Just could that be having an impact on the larger group process? I'm in no way wanting anyone to get into like finger pointing or anything like that, but I just think that this is something that we need to look at from a neutral perspective. What is best for the process and for the group as a whole, and maybe particularly when it comes to Firefly predictions. Just a thought. So passes are your friends. Passes are here to protect you. They are the main defense, the only defense, maybe not the only, but a major defense between a miss, losing money, decreasing statistical significance. So you want to make friends with them. And before you can make friends with someone, you need to understand maybe why you don't like them very much so you can get through that. Okay, watch out for cute puppies. They may be decoys. So this has nothing to do with what you were viewing, but I'm just throwing you a few curveballs here. And I'm pretty sure when I was leading you guys through this, I actually telepathically got something about somebody looking at a puppy. So I'm hoping I'm wrong with that and that nobody was thrown off. Remember that basketball analogy with those other players? That's what I'm doing for you here. And this is analogous sometimes to what happens with self-judging or when you see other things on your computer. The other thing, we're not going to really have time for this either, but originally when I decided to do this, I was being aware that there were a lot of things that were not being said. Viewers weren't saying to managers, managers weren't saying to viewers. And when things aren't being said, that means a lot of our feelings and emotions and concerns just get trapped within us. And that's not to say, obviously, app is a very vocal group. People do share their concerns. People do talk. But there's a whole level of stuff. It seems like there's things that people have permission to talk about and things that they don't. And this goes back to those paradigm changes and differences I was talking about before, where if we just believe that a psychic is just naturally gifted or not, some are better than others, some can only do what they're doing, well, then is it really right to say to them, you know what, you're not really turning in complete enough sessions, you're not being detailed enough. I would like you to spend more time with your session, or I'd like you to go back into your session and get more because I know you can give more, but you just didn't give me enough. If you don't think that a viewer can give you any more than they can, and that they're so vulnerable they're going to fall to pieces because you suggest that they didn't give you enough to judge, then why even bring it up? But if we're operating from another paradigm, the other paradigm that says the viewers can learn and they can be trained and they can improve, then you're not doing the best job you could as a group manager if you're not telling them what you need. And sometimes newer viewers may not know what you need, or just a whole range. In fact, there are plenty of times where I have violated the rule of, I was rushing, I was doing things at the last minute. I'm more guilty than of all these things than most people are. That's how why I feel free talking about it, because I am guilty myself. There's been plenty of times where I wrote to Nancy, my Sublime group manager, and I said, I turned in a session that I had just done for a few minutes, and I said, is this enough? Because if it's not, please tell me and I'll do more. I really did this at the last minute. And good for her, because she wrote me back and said, this really isn't enough. And then I was able to go back in and get more information. The interesting thing is that most of the time when I knew it wasn't enough. And maybe because I tend to do longer sessions and I know what I can do when I do a longer session, some targets just require tuning in real quickly, but others do require more time. And I know what I can provide personally when I take my time. And I know that a lot of times in just a couple of minutes is not enough for me personally. So I was sensing that. I gave her that permission and she wrote back. What I'm suggesting here is group managers, maybe you don't even wait for that permission from the viewer. Instead, if you need something, again, it's like the managers here are working hard. You've been doing this for a while. We all have. We have to have some level of expectations if we're going to go up to the next level, and we need to communicate those. And I know everyone here is savvy enough and good enough communicators to do it in a sensitive way. And as viewers, we can't be so sensitive. We can't fall apart if someone says, no, you didn't give me enough. I just don't have enough to be able to go either way. And there's nothing wrong with the manager saying that straight outward. And managers, if you're feeling guilty or nervous about that, this is something you really need to get over. Group managers, if you have a viewer that is displacing too frequently, and I know that's been me in the past, and I personally know of a couple of viewers who are some of the best viewers I know who are consistently displacing within app. And I don't have a problem saying, because I had to make these changes myself, and I'm not there yet. I had 2 sessions this week that I either displaced on or didn't do so well on. I did. And that was after several weeks of doing extremely well. It gets back to that learning curve of highs and lows, especially when you change up your techniques or methods. You're almost always, if you change your technique or your method, there's going to be kind of a disruption there in how easy this all seems. But again, if you're someone who is consistently displacing, then you need to really ask yourself, why am I doing this? Now, I had a slide here and I seem to have overlooked it, but what I want to say, and I think this is really important, your personal motivation for being involved in app and being involved in ARV. For several years until this year, I had the personal idea that I didn't really care about wagering. I was here to have fun, to learn about the process, and to improve my remote viewing as much as I could. And I could tell you initially, I didn't really care if I hit the right. I wanted to hit the right feedback photo. I'm not saying that, but I was oftentimes equally happy if I found out if I found out what the other photo was about and that I had hit that. And I used to even engage in behaviors where I would go behind my group managers' backs and talk to other viewers in order to find out what the other photo was. Because my overall goal was to be a good remote viewer and to know that I could remote view and get that practice. And I have to say now, and it was almost like a compulsion. And now I have changed. While I still love getting feedback and I still want to improve my sessions, I know that that behavior is not serving me as a viewer, and it's not serving the group as a whole, and it's not serving my own interests because I've invested in Firefly, as have a lot of other people. So whether or not you've invested in that or care about that isn't the issue. And I'm not telling you what to care about. I'm just suggesting that you ask yourself, if you are displacing frequently and you have been around, really what are your motivations? Because I do believe that if we can all get in alignment with our overall motivation, that our biggest number one thing that we need to achieve is to do a great job viewing the correct feedback photo, and that we don't celebrate it. We have to again decrease the satisfaction and decrease the joy we may feel that we know we at least viewed something right. And so those of you that still get that, like feeling like, oh good, I had a high score for something, needing to work on that. I'm still in the process of working on that myself, and that's why I feel like I am the person to be able to say that without feeling bad that I'm hurting anyone's feelings. We've already talked about paying attention to viewer confidence and feelings. Those darn decoy photos. Well, look at this here. We have a cute photo of a baby seal, and we have actual decoy duck photos, and neither of these are what you were supposed to be viewing. Again, just throwing in some obstacles there. This is life. There's always obstacles, and you could get upset about it or not. The thing is, you do not want to pay much attention to this whatsoever, because you are now about ready for your final feedback. And so I want you to all right now get ready. And before you actually see your final feedback, it's going to be really important that right now you take a moment and you might close your eyes again. This is just one technique, one way of working with what I'm calling here like a placeholder or a frame or something to put your attention on that's connected. So you might see that black screen again and know now that the real feedback photo that's connected to number 3333 is about to be shown. And let yourself just take a few deep breaths and even relax as you take those deep breaths. And know that what you're about to see is going to be a match, and know that everything is okay and everything is just fine. And then you can open your eyes and watch as I show this to you. Oops. Okay, I was hoping that would play again, but so did everybody see the, let me see if I can go back. So the feedback photo is sparkles, like fireworks in the background. And then there's also an image of a puzzle piece in a square shape, mostly square. And now just one point about this. I used to also have strong ideas that it was necessary for a picture to be of a location or of a real thing. And I can just tell you again, after just doing this experiment where I had 25 photos of photoshopped photos that really didn't make a whole lot of sense and the images weren't connected with each other, I realized that I could actually view those quite well. So I found it to be very helpful for viewers to know they can be flexible and that they can view different types of targets from different target pools. But keeping that in mind, it's important to realize too that when you start to view from a new target pool, new types of targets, again, a lot of times there's that learning curve, and initially it takes some adjustments to it, because actually sometimes some of your techniques that you may use different techniques for, say, for viewing a location than you would for a photoshopped photo or for a video or something like this. So now what I would like to do is just let you know that I do want to open this up for discussion and questions. I would love that, and I'll stay for as long as people would like to stay. Um, I know we are well over our time now, but this is my last slide here. And I'll just say, please join us for part two. Part two will focus on more specifically the actual remote viewing. This will be good, very good for beginner remote viewers, but there may be some things that I can share that I've learned along the way, taken from controlled remote viewing and from viewing lots of different targets, that particularly pictures where it may be helpful for you. So you can look forward to part two in the weeks to come. I don't have a date set yet. I'll see how much interest there is from those who attended, or it also won't be necessary to go to have seen this to go to that one, but it will be helpful. So now I would like to, and I'll put it back on this, on this while we're talking. Again, I do want to also apologize that I didn't give you guys a chance to discuss or talk. I didn't intend to be talking for 3 hours straight. So next time I'll be much better about that. But does anyone have any comments or questions or anything that we discussed that really, I'd love to hear from people. If you could say like anything that was brought up that um, gave you like any kind of realization, or that maybe you feel like you really need to spend more time focusing on.
Well, hey, Deborah, this is Scott. Is it okay if I talk now?
Oh, yes, please go ahead.
Oh, well, thank you. I want to just, thanks again for putting this together, Deborah. And, putting a PowerPoint together is a time-consuming process, and, making it and speaking to it. It's very good. So thank you again for doing this. So I've been roughly doing RV for maybe like just about a year and a half now, but it came to me really quickly when I first got training with it. And I got it through Joe McMonagle down at the Monroe Institute. And I'm not, advocating that Joe is the only one. I'm just saying that that's where my training was. And a few things I've learned of what Debra has mentioned, I've also experienced with the team I've been working with. And there's a few things I think that'll help everybody. I just put out some information on the chat. I've been really chitty-chatty today, way too much caffeine, so I'm sorry if I was annoying anybody. I'll apologize about that ahead of time. But a few important things that Debra did mention, and I agree with wholeheartedly, is stress, watching your stress. Stress and rushing the process will definitely not work. I've seen this with my team and myself. I've done both the RVer as well as the monitor equally over time, and stress will just totally mess it up. So balancing your life and finding those stress-free points, that can be a really challenge. For some people, it can maybe not so hard, but I know for many people, if you have kids and a job or commutes and all that kind of stuff, or whatever you're dealing with, getting that stress under control will help you to be much, much more accurate. The other part I want to emphasize on is everybody's looking for hacks and cheats. That's what I put on audio. I typed out on the topic. There's a recent one. It's on Gaiam TV, episode number 89 under Wisdom TV, and it's specific. I'm going